thank you very much for this introduction, and I'm quite embarrassed.
That's the intention.
And when I get embarrassed, I start speaking Italian. Don't panic. Comunque ringrazio ancora gli organizzatori di questa bellissima occasione e sono veramente felice di essere a UG in questa occasione scientifica e questa per la visita di questa mostra, che è veramente una mostra straordinaria, straordinariamente eccitante. So don't panic, I'm going to speak or read in English, and you will all excuse my English because I had to translate my paper myself. So maybe, but anyway, I hope you'll all understand what I want to say. In 1630, the construction of the Church of Santa Maria della Salute in Venice, one of the masterpieces of Italian Baroque architecture by Longhena, was decided as a solemn public ex voto to the Virgin Mary for the end of the plague. As it often happened for architectural works of special importance, projects were officially requested to those that were then considered as the most important Italian centers as far as modern architecture was concerned: Rome and Florence. Quite surprisingly, though, in Rome, the Venetian ambassador wrote that good architects were lacking there, and that only Bernini could be hired, but as a sculptor, not as an architect. Being already very rich and busy, Bernini would have very likely turned down their invitation anyway. On the contrary, in Florence, the Venetian resident was excited at the idea of contacting architects and artists. He wrote letters to Venice strongly recommending Gerardo Silvani, then in charge of the construction of the new cathedral, the new facade of the cathedral, which is the wooden model you see there. In this odd comparison between Rome and Florence, as seen from Venice at the beginning of the Baroque age, it is interesting to read that from Rome, the Venetian ambassador decided to send home examples of modern churches built in Rome, that is, alcuni disegni stampati, that is, prints of the most important churches. From Florence, the Venetian resident could only send a small sketch with Silvani's project of the Duomo's facade. No prints were available at that time in Florence. This anecdote can help us understand how different places could develop different attitudes and approaches toward the representation of their architecture and built environment. The Roman world of the first half of the 18th century, where the experiences of Vasi, Piranesi, and Noli are so tightly linked, can be seen in the context of a rich century-old tradition. Their work, so original and innovative, is deeply rooted in the history of the printing world, with its rules, its market, its artistic and production peculiarities and needs. Vasi and Piranesi developed such tradition, creating new trends of instant and, certainly in the case of Piranesi, enduring success. Since the middle of the 16th century, Rome is perhaps the liveliest European center for production and marketing of architectural prints. The Speculum Romane Magnificentia is perhaps the most successful series of this kind ever produced, focused on ancient Roman monuments. Venice specialized in the printing of theoretical and technical books from Serio to Vignola, Palladio, Scamozzi, rich with architectural illustrations, but architectural and vedute prints became popular there only during the second half of the 17th century. Florence lagged behind and followed even later, and a proper production of architectural prints started there only in the first half of the 18th century. By the end of the 16th century, the production of architectural prints in Rome included not only views, measured surveys and reconstructions of ancient Roman monuments, but also urban views, urban views and modern monuments, churches and palaces, often collected in series and books with long captions, texts, and explanations. During the pontificate of Sixtus V, 1585-1590, All the grand urban technical and architectural realizations were officially glorified with a rich production of books and prints. And the volume by Domenico Fontana on the transportation of the Vatican obelisk, which included prints of all the major architectural endeavors of the Pope, becomes a true masterpiece of this journey. A book that becomes a successful model that is copied and quoted through the Baroque age. At the end of the Seicento, these are prints from Fontana's book published in Rome in 1690. At the end of the Seicento, Carlo Fontana's Il Tempio Vaticano, a book on the Vatican, is a tribute to the work of his famed ancestor. Roman Baroque architecture and urbanism planned keen attention to their official image through the production and diffusion of prints. The market of these images is becoming huge during the 17th and 18th century. Rome is protagonist, but there are roles played by other Italian centers as well. We can just mention the case of Rubens' book on the Palazzi di Genova, Genoa's palaces, 1622, or Furtenbach, Architectura Civile of 1628. Here you have one of Rubens' surveys of 20 or so palazzi in Genoa, and that's a rather Nordic representation of the Palazzo Pitti in Florence by Furtenbach. These texts spread throughout Europe Italian architectural models and testify the strong links with Dutch and Flemish artists and gravers and the printing industry. During the Seicento, Rome is perhaps the most cosmopolitan and active center for the production of architectural prints and urban views. Many publishers supplied the market, and by the middle of the century, the different branches of the De Rossi family of printers became the most active there, sometimes even aggressive producers of an incredible number of printed architecture. Loose sheets with plans, facades, and cross-section of churches and palaces, we can figure what the Venetian ambassador in Rome must have sent to Venice in 1630, are then grouped in series and collections, such as the ones by Dominique Barrière, who engraved church facades, as well as panoramas, Valérien Regnard, church facades, the plans and elevations of palazzi by Pietro Ferrerio, and Venturini's villas and fountains. Series and miscellaneous materials became often illustrated monographs, where the relation between text and images can vary. The meaning and scope of these publications can vary as well: documentary, encomiastic, devotional, literary. St. Peter's was reproduced continuously from the 16th century onwards. Everybody in Europe could easily find prints with different aspects, historical, artistic, as well as technical, of the church and its changing aspect from the Renaissance through the Baroque age. The construction of Palazzo Barberini, here from Ferrerio and Falda, started in 1629, is documented by such a rich production of prints that is unknown in any previous example. Plans and elevations, Pietro da Cortona's frescoes, probably reproduced, a lavishly illustrated monograph, Girolamo Teti's Edes Barberine, 1640. These are the plates from Teti's book, a true monograph on the palazzo. All main architectural works by Bernini, the Baldacchino, Piazza San Pietro, Sant'Andrea al Quirinale, Ariccia, were reproduced, and it's not surprising that the young Giambattista Falda was trained in Bernini's workshop. Borromini himself thought of publishing all his works. The Trinitarians at San Carlino recorded that while their church was still under construction, foreigners asked for prints of its intriguing plan. The request came from as far as the Indies, they say, and that in 17th century Rome means America, of course. By the end of the 17th century, Carlo Fontana's large folio illustrated books on the Vatican, the Colosseum, the Montecitorio, set a new standard in the Roman and indeed European print world. At the same time, there booms a production of miscellaneous print collection promoted by the De Rossi family. All major buildings of modern Rome, here is the frontispiece to the Studio di Architettura Civile by the De Rossi, At the end of the 17th century, all major buildings of modern Rome, both churches and palaces, were thus reproduced in what became the codified triad of plan, elevation, and cross-section. Here is the example of Pietro da Cortona's Santa Maria della Pace in De Rossi's prints of the end of the 17th century. So, by the end of the century, the Baroque city and its architectural masterpieces could be seen and studied all over Europe through books and images, often produced to glorify the political agenda of the popes. The official image of Rome, the triumphant capital of Christianity, is thus cautiously built and widespread through a dedicated industry, the printing industry. And next to prints, the Teatro by Falda, series and books, of course we have to mention the rich production of city views and maps, often drawn and etched by the same artists and architects from Tempesta, Groiker, Maggi, Falda, Croyle, celebrating the forma urbis of ancient and modern Rome. And this is Falda's map. You have a very fine example of Falda's map, the first edition of Falda's map upstairs in the exhibition. And this is how this image gives you an idea of what they did with these large maps. This is Samuel Pepys Library in London in the second half of the 17th century, and you can see Falda's map here hanging on the wall. Falda's 1665 Nuovo Teatro delle Fabbriche ed edifici in prospettiva di Roma moderna sotto il pontificato of Alexander VII. A second volume was published in 1665 and a third volume in 1669, is an international bestseller. A winning formula used in 1699 by Alessandro Specchi, Nuovo Teatro for Pope Innocent XII, and again as late as 1739 by Giuseppe Vasi himself, together with other etchers, in his Nuovo Teatro delle Fabbriche, so for Pope Clement XII, published by Giovanni Domenico Campiglia in the new Papal Calcografia, that is the institution that Gentax was mentioning before. Falda's successful formula of correct architectural data set in panoramic urban views, as developed in a series of prints with palaces and villas, will be essential through Specchi for the fortune of Vasi and indeed Piranesi as well. Though Piranesi, of course, had been already trained in the highly advanced Venetian milieu. Some of Piranesi's vedute of Rome can be seen as true architectural elevations. This is Falda's work on St. Peter's. You see, this is a very interesting print as well by Falda with St. Peter, the center of Christianity, and all other European Christian churches, the Cathedral of Florence, but there's also St. Paul's in London, the Cathedral of Milan, and St. Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. I mean, the beginning of the architectural book starts at this stage.